Hello. Nice to meet you. So I'm Sara, and I work for Thoughtworks. So Thoughtworks is a software consultancy, and I started there my career about 8 years ago, and I've been a consultant for many years, and then I moved to the dark side. I started to work for the global internal team. So I'm now head of customer experience for the IT department. So my customers are not anymore our clients, but are all our employees and our business functions. So to give you an idea of the size, we have 12,000 employees worldwide, and we have in the IT department around 450 people, divided in 30 plus cross-functional teams. And I'm the co-author of the Data Awesome Academy. So how many of you have worked with data? Raise your hand. Good half. How many of you foresee they will work with data in the rest of your career? A few more. So the guy up there is my boss. He's the Thoughtworks CIO. And he's a visionary on its own. And several years ago, ahead of time, he really wanted to make Thoughtworks a data-driven place. As a software consultancy, we certainly don't lack developers. We have many. So we built a phenomenal engineering data platform that also won several awards. But we were missing a bit, something that I call the last mile, how we connected that to our users' need. So I was very new in the role as head of customer experience with such a large team. I was terrified. It was my first ever data project. So very humbly, I started to work with a couple of teams and help them with dashboards and reports. And suddenly they got better until these all developed in over 10 hours of content and a foundational training that today is one of the basics for all our consultants all over the world that want to start with data. So the best part is this is not hard, as I thought I was when I was terrified when I started to work with data. This is the kind of content I wish someone gave me when I started my data project, because as the people from Federico and Filippo were saying before, I was the kind of designer that was afraid of data because I'd never worked with them. So after giving this course to hundreds of people, I learned that it mostly helped those two kinds. And raise your hand if it's in one of those. So first is everyone that would like to approach data but is a little bit terrified. Anyone? And also data scientists and data engineers, people that are seasoned professional and they spend most of their career with data, but from a heavy engineering background. So we're going to cover three things. I promise I won't give you all the 10 hours of content, just 20 minutes, and I'll be quick and hopefully fun. We're going to talk about the problem, we're going to talk about the mindset, and we're going to talk about the method. So let's talk about the problem. So how a data project gone wrong look like? They almost look the same. There has been a big investment up front. This usually makes the leadership extremely nervous because they have to justify the investment. And then huge effort. There are a bunch of people and teams that are working really hard, but they don't seem to deliver much value. And then there's a bunch of unsatisfied users. And this created a ton of pressure. And then you have people like the CIO saying, how do we justify the investments? Or why are we working so hard and we don't seem to deliver enough value? So this happened to us at Thoughtworks as well, and this was our wrong assumption where we started from. We believed that data availability was proportional to customer satisfaction. So we were oversimplifying the problem. We'll make data available, people are going to be happy. We're just going to throw data at them. And this was true for the first couple of years, where actually we had no data. So we were giving them data, they were happy, but then something happened. I still remember when I heard this sentence from one of our very, very senior leaders. I can't make head or tail of it. And this was true for many of our dashboards and reports. Dashboard and reports that go to finance, recruitment, HR. So a lot of companies say we want to be data-driven. What data-driven or data-enabled or data-empowered actually means is that people are using the data as frequently as they need to get their job done. And we weren't delivering on that promise. So we even created terms to talk about our frustration. So the terminology, we call it the chain of discontent. So there's a huge data effort. A lot of people are doing a lot of work. Many resources have been put in. There's data frustration. Users are not satisfied and perceive little value. And then there is the worst one that creeps in slowly. That is the data mistrust. So you arrive at a point where people don't even trust the data that you're showing them. And what was happening in our case was that they were going back to spreadsheet. Again, the people from Accurate were saying that spreadsheet worked for them. And our case was a little bit different because we have dynamic data. Our data about finance and HR is changing every minute, day, hour. So if people are using their spreadsheet, we can't control if their data is up to date. And they might be making important decisions on data that's not accurate. So how do we go from data frustration and data empowerment? And what's the difference? The big difference is about the expectation. So frustration, data experience below expectations, and usually you can detect it with very simple symptoms. There is people feeling overwhelmed. They tell you that you're wasting their time, and they fall back to comfort, spreadsheet in our case. Empowerment feels a bit like magic, but is mostly about meeting or exceeding their expectation and helping them to do whatever they're trying to do. So it was about time to shift the mindset. Our team have been blind to the user's need and too much focus on the engineering. Because actually making data available is complicated enough. We can talk about cubes, pipelines, data platform. But again, we were missing the last mile. How do we make this valuable for people? So this sentence really changed the perception of many people on our team. And it's borrowed from Kathy Sierra. This is a great book, by the way, if you haven't read it yet. So people don't buy new camera because they want the camera, but what they want is to become better photographer. So we were always talking about the data, and we were not talking about the people. So we created this slogan, making everyone data awesome. It's not about making data available. It's about what people are going to do with that data. And our initial assumption about making data available and the rest will take care of itself changed a little bit. Humans don't need data. Machines are great with data. Humans need information. So we had to craft a new process, a co-design process, that could help our engineers and our designers to work alongside the people that were going to use the data to make them useful for them. Are you ready for the approach? So it's very simple. There are 6 steps, and I'm going to tell about it in a very linear way. The reality, as always, the practice is a little bit messier than this. But this is how it works. So identify your audience, so who are you designing for, and then try to understand what the hell they're actually trying to do instead of throwing data at them, and what questions they need to answer to get their job done. Check if we have the answers, and then organize the answers in a way that help them to achieve a result. And do all of this together with them, so at the end, they will trust you and the result. Sound simple? Let's look at each one of them. So, audience. The worst pitfall is, I think everyone knows, is designing for everyone. Designing for everyone is the recipe for not for success, ultimately. And the other pitfall was that our engineering team was designing for their own data literacy. At some point, we had this fantastic dashboard that had drill-in feature, drill-down, drop-off. You could basically do anything with it until we found out that the people that were going to use it, our recruiter was not as tech-savvy. They were using 20% of that dashboard and complaining that they couldn't find the most basic data. So how to cater for the right audience, but also to their data literacy. So jobs to be done. What are those people trying to do? Let me give you an example. For example, in case of an IT department, we empower many functions. Let's talk about recruitment. So we want to empower recruiters to maybe stick to the recruitment target by giving them data about the thing that they care about. For example, in our company, gender balance, tenure, which country are we hiring for. So one of the biggest problems with throwing data at people is that they don't know where to use them or when to use them. It's not embedded in their workflow. So if we're going one step toward them, and we were asking, when are you using this data? Usually these people had like a weekly session. They had a weekly meeting where they were looking at the report, and they were using that report to make better decisions for that entire week. If we could improve that moment, that micro moment, with our data, we were moving a step toward the data-driven organization by improving the moment where they were using the data. This is also called change management. If we were already building for the workflow, we didn't have to work too hard on the adoption itself. And this is one of the things that actually made the biggest difference. Imagine a dashboard, a report. The majority of our dashboard were misunderstood. After a while, people didn't remember who were they for and what they were supposed to help them with. So we decided to make expectation explicit on every dashboard. So at the top of every dashboard, what people can see is, who is this for, what is this supposed to help you with, and which business outcome this will help you with. So when we are going to talk about expectation, we can measure on something real. Are we meeting those expectations or not? And we could qualify a bit better what unhappy customers meant to us. So we call this the contract. So what was different between the traditional approach and what we were trying to do? Usually the traditional approach is to make data available and organize them around a topic. What we were trying to do was to organize them around those micro moments, an audience, a specific time frame, a jobs to be done, and to make expectations very explicit. Number 3, the questions. So what questions people need to answer to get the job done? So imagine those people are in a meeting and they don't only have their question, but they have bosses asking themselves questions. So and this is where the exercise proves a little bit tricky. We really wanted to spend time to understand how we can help you with. It's not about the data. It's about what questions do you need to answer to look smart to your boss, to look proactive with your colleagues, and to be able to do a better job. So if you're doing this right, this looks like a post-it exercise. And then each piece of the post-its becomes part of the report itself. We did the same with the questions. So we saw how we put the expectation at the top of the dashboard, but also what we did, and this seems too simple to be meaningful, we embedded the questions in the dashboard. Another thing that we learned by doing usability testing and talking to people is people didn't know what data they were looking at. Of course, they were not trusting it. So we embedded the question. Our goal was at any time, everyone in the company should be able to understand, is this dashboard or report for me? Yes or no? Is this meeting my expectation? Yes or no? And also, which answers this is giving me. We didn't always have the answers, and that was the best part. Because if you start from the data availability, you only throw at people what you have. But who's actually driving what data we make available? It's a lot more interesting if we start from the questions, because the designers on the team, the researcher, were able to support the prioritization of the data. So what data should we prioritize first? Not the low-hanging fruit, but what is actually meaningful for our end users. Here is a quote from Barry O'Reilly that I think is really meaningful, and it says, information portfolio management is not about looking at what data you have, but is deciding what data you need and figuring out how to get it. And this is mostly when I get pissed off when people think that applying research or human-centric design skills to data is about data visualization. It's true, it is, and that's a super interesting and big part, but it can, from a business perspective, can be a lot more. And it can be in actually defining the strategy of the data. So again, what's the difference with the traditional approach? You display the data available instead of displaying answers to questions and exploring what information are missing. So what do you do when you have the answers? So when you have the answers, again, by now you know, we don't throw them at people, but we organize them in a meaningful way. We design them in a way that it looks like a journey. So we introduced a concept called business health. It's very simple. Executives and leaders are crazy busy. They don't have time to stare at your dashboard for hours. So can they, in 30 minutes, understand if things are going well or no? So our dashboard mostly look like expectation at the top, business health second, and I'll reveal the rest later. So I think the dashboard, when this is a marketing dashboard, is a real example. And I was going in and it was telling me, OK, we have 8,000 subscribers. So what? Is it a good number? Is it a bad number? So we spend a lot of time trying to qualify the numbers. So a number, you need a lot of pre-knowledge to understand if a number is usually good or bad. So what we introduced was this concept where we brought in historical data. Is this more or less than last month, last year? How are we going? Or can we benchmark this to external data? So at a glance, you need to understand if the data is telling you something positive or not. When you look at the dashboard, the first thing you should answer is, do I have a problem or no? And so expectation, do I have a problem? If you don't have a problem, maybe you can move on, go on with your life. It's like looking at a traffic light. It's green, go ahead. But if it's red, you need to do a few actions. So how can we support people within this journey, the data journey? So we organized the dashboard in a way that they could investigate the problem, detect exactly where the problem was, and even mitigate the problem. This meant no dead ends. The dashboard doesn't end with the data, but it ends up connecting you, for example, to the system, or you need to change, or to the person you need to talk to clarify something. So it creates a circle that basically helps you from the beginning to understand if you have a problem to actually solving it. And then the last part, this actually should happen during all the phases, and it's about the feedback. This was one of the first dashboards, so it looks quite rudimental, but we did something very clever. People didn't trust the data. So we took someone with a very good reputation in Thoughtworks from one of those departments, and we asked them to shoot a video to show everyone else how they were using the dashboard. In a week, the dashboard increased its user by 4-fold. And we also collect feedback. We treat each dashboard as a product, continuous feedback. And another thing that has proven really, really useful is metadata. So what is metadata? Data about data. For example, very simply put, people were checking their spreadsheet and say, hey, your data look different. The reality was that the data was the same, but they were using a different formula. So we made all of those things explicit using tooltips or even embedding the formula right in the dashboard. So the data became a lot richer. Again, what's the difference? So in traditional approach, dashboards evolve when more data becomes available, while what we were doing is to curate the narrative and also to evolve it based on continuous feedback. So we talked about services, and this is another really, really good read. And this book shows 15 principles of good services. And if we look at these, those can apply to data as well. Is it easy to find? Does it explain its purpose? Clearly set user expectation? Enable targeted users to complete the outcome they set out to do? So by now, I hope that if you're a designer and you haven't worked with data, you're thinking, what the hell? I have a lot of transferable knowledge here to make a real difference in data. So let's recap. The problem, data frustration, the mindset. Stop looking about the data from an engineering perspective and think about empowering the people that will have to use them. And then the approach. A co-design approach where we are designing a meaningful experience for the people that will use the data so we can make them better, make them data awesome. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Cool. Thank you a lot, Sara.
No. There's one question.
There is one question. I always miss them.
I am a friend of Sara, so I can ask also the question after, but I wanted to ask it for the crowd. Sara, you explained it as a very important thing. I wanted to ask if this is something that you did for Thoughtworks, or you are also empowering the companies you support. So, and how do you do it? So how do you explain the power of data and how to make data awesome also for the others, not just for yourself, I mean, your company?
Yeah, I think like this. I think this is how we're spreading the words. But what I really care about more than the organization is to empower the designers. I've seen, we have over 300 designers at Thoughtworks. And when we start a data project, I don't see them disengaged, but almost fearful sometimes about getting their hands dirty, but they have so much to give. And it's a shame if we can't add that view, that pair of eye and that skill set to data, because it's a hot topic. There's a lot to be done still. And this is only the basics. I wonder how other folks can build on top of this framework.